Hi everyone, my name is Takaaki Hiratsuka. I am the conference chair of JALT 2023. Here in this Zoom sphere, I'm thrilled to have one of the keynote speakers for the conference, Professor Gary Barkhuizen from the University of Auckland, New Zealand. Thank you for joining us, Gary.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to chatting.
Same here. So to start, I'd like you to provide a brief overview of your area of expertise and your current research interests. What are you working on these days?
Okay, so I work at the University of Auckland in New Zealand, as you said. And one of the things I focus on in my work is in language teacher education. So I work in a section of a school called Applied Linguistics and Language Teaching. And most of the work I do there is working with pre-service teachers and in-service teachers. And the research I do informs my work with these teachers who are either preparing to become teachers. We work in TESOL, but we also work generally in applied linguistics. So sometimes the teachers are planning to be or are teachers of other languages as well. So my research generally is in the field of language teacher education. I'm particularly interested in who teachers are, how they become who they are. So identity is a key word in the research that I do, teacher identity. But the whole idea of identity, what identity is, what it means, how identities are constructed with other people in classrooms and schools. So that means I also am interested in language learner identity. So identity is something that I focus on a lot in my research. And the type of research I do typically when looking at identity it is research that has a very narrative angle to it. So I'm interested in the stories that people tell about their research, about their experiences of being language learners or language teachers. So narrative inquiry is the approach I typically use for my research, although I have experience in lots of other types of research as well. But generally, sort of qualitative narrative types of research is what I do. And I've written quite extensively on narrative research, narrative inquiry, in exploring teacher identity particularly. But I also look at the area of study abroad, which is another area that I'm interested in, language learners and language teachers studying abroad, which of course was disrupted by the COVID pandemic, which created a new research topic, in fact. And so that's an area that I've been looking at for a number of years. What happens to language learners, not only their identity, but also their language use and language acquisition while on study abroad. And teachers, why do teachers go on study abroad? Sometimes on a short exchange, sometimes for a semester, sometimes independently to do an entire degree, whether it's a BA or a PhD to study abroad. And I'm interested in why they do that, what happens to them when they do that. And again, the types of research approaches that I use are very much those that try to understand the teachers or the learners' experiences from their own perspective, and therefore narrative inquiry. I'm coming back to that. Narrative inquiry is a very appropriate method for doing that. So those are the areas I work in: teacher identity, teacher education, study abroad, narrative inquiry.
Right. I cannot wait to hear more about it. And with that, with your expertise and experience and current interest, what kind of a key message do you plan to convey during your presentations at JALT 2023 in November?
Okay, well, it's still some way off, but what I'm really planning on doing is looking at the theme of the conference, growth mindsets, which I think is a fascinating area of study and has been around for some time in psychology. And in applied linguistics, language teaching and learning, it's been around focusing on language learners, but not so much on language teachers. Not much research has been done on language teachers. I've been doing a little bit of reading on looking at growth mindsets and fixed mindsets, actually, in relation to language teachers. So what I want to do in the in my presentation is to explore a little bit more about what growth mindsets and fixed mindsets mean for language teachers. And I want to bring into that the idea of the connection with mindsets and teacher identity. Because I think we have beliefs, we have mindsets about how we can change, how we can develop. And the word "we" there as teachers is very important. So how does identity and who we are, how we see ourselves as teachers, how other people see us as teachers, how does that relate to growth mindsets or fixed mindsets in the work we do, in our practices? So that's the third link I'm trying to make. So we've got the mindsets, we've got the identity, and then we've got the practices, what we actually do as teachers in our classrooms and our schools. So I want to look at the link between those three. And what I'm planning to do is to draw on excerpts of storied data from teachers and teacher educators, from teachers and teacher educators that I've collected and gathered from different parts of the world to try to illustrate these connections. So it's foregrounding, I think, identity, the importance of identity in the connection between mindsets, which I see as running along a continuum. It's not you have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset, but there are these series of continua that I'm going to be covering. And I want to see how those relate to identity and how these become evident in the practices of teachers and teacher educators.
Okay, yeah, understanding and highlighting the linkage, intersectionality of those complex cognitions and experiences of teachers, teacher educators, and researchers. How do you envision your presentations relating to them would be benefiting the conference attendees as well as the broader community members in our field then?
Okay, so the way I plan to show those intersections amongst those three main concepts that I've been talking about is to draw on the stories of authentic data that I've collected or that I've come across in some literature and so on. And then what I'm going to do with that is I'm trying to work on a framework, a teacher education framework. I'll put it together in diagrammatic form, and I'll build up to that in my presentation by working through the stories and finally come up with this framework. And what I'm hoping will happen and what I will encourage the audience in the presentation to do is try to plot their own experiences within this framework. So it'll be a sort of interactive part of the presentation, I guess. And this will be for members of the audience to say, oh, where would I fit into this framework in the work that I'm currently doing, or the work that I've done, or the practices I see myself doing in the future. So I'll have a series of continua, and I will show how they interact with each other in a professional language teacher, educator, education framework. And what I'm hoping is that, as I've said, that the audience will be able to locate themselves within this framework in some ways so that it becomes meaningful for them as members of the audience. And I think that, beyond the audience itself, I think this could make a contribution to trying to understand what we do as teachers, as teacher educators, who have so many different components or aspects or facets to their identities. They're not only involved in pedagogy, many are involved in research as well, teacher research, action research, work we do in our classrooms from a exploratory research perspective. And we're involved in professional service. We're doing so much. And I guess one of the other messages I'm trying to look at is, how much can we do? We may have a growth mindset, but are there limits to what we can actually do in terms of who we are, the identity, and what we can do, the practice. So there may be some words of caution, I guess, in terms of fitting into this language teacher education framework that I'm working towards in the presentation.
Wow, sounds very profound as well as amazing and fascinating. As you know, Gary, I am someone who can listen to your story, your interview forever, but I guess we will just stop this interview to be making this as a cliffhanger for future prospective conference attendees for JALT 2023. I cannot express enough excitement to be able to meet you in person in Tsukuba City in November. Looking forward to collaborating with you, and we will finish the interview for now, but I'm excited. Thank you so much for participating in this interview. I'll see you soon, Gary.
Thank you. See you soon.